It's really important understanding why you are doing this. There are people that just want to cover the region because they understanding that maybe covering the region is excitement, or it's like, well, I will be a hero, or I will have awards. That's not the ultimate reason of the profession. Any success can be replaced, but you have to understand first who you are. Are you somebody calm enough to face specific situation? What is the ultimate reason? If your ultimate reason is success, well, we are far from the goal.
From Oman, I am Francesca Maria Lorenzini, and this is Near East, the podcast that tries to make a sense of the Middle East. Our guest today is Laura Silvia Battaglia, an Italian journalist and filmmaker who has lived in Yemen between 2012 and 2015. She's an expert of the region at large and has contributed to international outlets such as the Washington Post and Italian national newspapers. Thank you so much for joining me today, Laura.
Morning, Francesca, and welcome everyone.
Laura, you're not only a journalist that I really admire, but I also consider you to be one of my mentors. I really look up to you as a model to how to talk about the region, also how to live in the region, because as I mentioned, you lived in Yemen for many years. You also spent a lot of time in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in many other countries of the region. So I'm really happy that you could join me today, because I feel like when it comes to the Middle East, many journalists fail to really understand the region, and many times the region is just narrated in a really Orientalist way, and in a way that they just want some of their biases to be confirmed. And I feel like you're really different when it comes to this. So I would like to start from the beginning. What brought you to Yemen? How did it all begin?
Thank you so much, Francesca, for asking this question and for having me and hosting me here. And thank you so much for your kind words. As you know, I really love young journalists, and part of my life is dedicated to raise new generations, because also I learn from you a lot, and we learn each other through the exchange between the generations. So that's one of my goals, in the teaching journalism. And I'm really glad to have a lot of friends who are younger than me. Then going back to your question, well, some fun fact, because actually what brought me to Yemen fully, staying there for months, was the idea of asking a sabbatic here to the newspaper I was working for. And I had to decide if I want to be a fully employee or to continue to be a freelance journalist. And I needed to have space in my mind. And then I decided to go to Yemen also because it was just after the so-called Arab Springs in 2011. I went around the region in Libya, in Syria, in Egypt, in Tunisia, except Bahrain was the only one I couldn't sneak into. But what brought me to Yemen was first the fact that the revolution in Yemen, such as the revolution in Tunisia, was the only one successful at the beginning. Only 50 people dead in the Karama massacre, and I just don't want to sound cynic, but compared to the others, and also compared to the war in Libya that started to blow after the revolution, was really something. And then I want to understand which kind of anti-corps this society had to cope with the regime change. And that was the first reason, which is not personal, but of course is professional. And the second professional reason was that this country has an amazing beauty. This natural, we can say natural beauty, which is a specific beauty related to the Arabian Peninsula in terms of nature. But at the same time, the presence of human beings there always were and are still, we can say, and somehow, despite the war, very respectful of the environment in terms of building palaces or everything, but they are naturally embroidered with the environment, with the plants, with everything, with the mountains. And I was always fascinated by the fact that one of the main writers, poets, and director, Italian one, was Pier Paolo Pasolini, was amazed by Yemen, and he decided to realize a couple of his movies there, including a great documentary named The Walls of Sana'a. And this happened in the 70s. And I watched actually this documentary when I was 17 during the first Gulf War. And something happened to me when I was a teenager when I watched that. And I thought that I really wanted to see that place before anything potentially could happen in the region. So that's the three reasons that brought me there.
You are one of the greatest experts of Yemen that I know, and your relationship with Yemen is really personal because also your husband was from there. So you really lived the family dimension in Yemen. How did it shape your way of reporting on Yemen?
That's an important question. And I just want to underline that what brought me to Yemen was professional reasons. I stayed there for until 2015. Then, things happen in life, the good and the bad, and happened. I met my future husband. But I always wanted to say, and my husband knew that I always told him I fall in love with Yemen before I felt in love with you, because that's the reality. That's what really happened. And then, I can tell you that that's 100%. Your position in a country where you are an observer is completely different when you became part of the country. That's has brought good things and also potential dangers and problems. I start with the good things. The good things are that you are part of the society. So you are allowed to listen to and closely to any kind of issue that a family has and this world has. You are not somebody's outsider. You are adopted by that society. That means that sometimes you receive the same treatment of Yemeni woman, not from your family, because this family is so open and they love me very much, but then you start also to understand what's going on. You face potential threat because you are half foreign, half insider. So they love you because you are insider and you accepted to marry a Yemeni man. But at the same time, some people who don't love foreigners start to think that maybe you could be a spy or you could be somebody who's who did that for any other reasons. Conspiracies are always around in this part of Asia, which is something obvious because of the history of these countries, because of everything, people from Europe or from USA, honestly speaking, did there and are still doing. So it's a constant going out and in yourself and like building a personality where you are both things in one. And then you try to protect the good things and then to reject the bad things and always stay in balance. Just want to say something about being part of this society. Being part of this society means that you understand closely little details. They're not little, are really huge. And then you can apply in your profession. Giving you an example. Talking in a circle woman, having chai, having tea in the afternoon after lunch, when men, they go to chewing gum in a place and you stay with a woman. And then, there's a first circle that allows the young women who are not already married to stay with you. It's a perfect way to watch how the relation between the older women, the elders also, and the young people work. And it's a kind of like a mixture of giving advices, battling between women for the best daughter possible, trying to understanding the needs of the young women, but at the same time trying to guide them, sometimes trying to, find also nice ways to tell horrible stories with, joking, talking about food, talking about modeling, designing clothes, all this female stuff that's always hated. But it was brought into like this female environment where they look at me like how strange this woman is that talks about politics. Politics is not allowed in the circle woman, generally speaking. But then they get intrigued by my being strange woman that has this crazy profession that works a lot, then also talks about politics, that has access. I have access to the men places. That's something that they don't. And there are some that try to convince you that's not a good thing, but then you convince them back that a woman can do that. It's really interesting because I feel that I could be a game changer in this environment. Last thing is that, which is very interesting, once the younger women go out of the session, old women start to really talk spicy in terms, sex relation with their husband, and also they tell stories or sometimes sad stories when a man decides to have a second wife. And then they know they can, they have to accept it, but they do anything possible to do not. And then there are also sad stories of, women that kill themselves for this reason. Never have these stories if you are a foreign, if you are not part of the families. You can't have access to that, because telling this story is a shame for the culture, the society. It's a shame for that family. So that's really important. That's why Yemeni journalists, women who are Yemeni journalists fully, are needed, are important. They can't be fully a substitution of a foreign. We complete each other, I can say, because somebody who comes from abroad can have, of course, a fresh eye, but at the same time has biases. And who is inside struggles to get outside, but sometimes stops at her mouth because of many reasons, family issues, political issues, and because you have to survive and you have to keep going, doing the job that you love most in the world.
While you were talking about your experience, it came to my mind one of your graphic novels, La Sposa Yemenita, the Yemeni Bride, which is the first work of yours that I've ever read. I was preparing my bachelor thesis 3 years ago now. And I remember that my professor, my supervisor, suggested me to read your work because I was working on a thesis about women in the Middle East, West Asia, and I was focusing on Yemen and Iran. You were describing a scene in a henna party, and I remember I really loved how you described that scene because I could really see that you were part of the society, and I became really curious about it. I would like to know, you don't find a lot of coverage when it comes to Yemeni women. It's also true that Yemen is a really inaccessible country compared to others in the region. So, of course, this plays a role to this because I always have the feeling that when it comes to women in the region, there is a sort of, let's call it, obsession from Western media when it comes to Iran specifically. We are seeing it these days. But when it comes to Yemen, it doesn't really happen. In your opinion, why?
Why? Because Yemeni women are dying in the darkness. If we want to use a famous headline of a newspaper, there are two practical reasons. The first one is that the best Yemeni women journalists are all abroad. They can't have access anymore to the country. That could be really risky. Some of them can have access to the south, but sometimes they can't reach the north, where the problems are bigger than the south in somehow at the moment. So that's the first reason. Second, because when it comes to the very few foreign female journalists who enter the country, actually the system force you to stay confined in a hotel, which is the best, like the Queen of Sheba place in Sana'a, where you have even, fully good bathroom. And then you have luxurious things that will never exist even in any hotel in Yemen. And then secret services, they accompany you everywhere. And you are not free to talk with anyone unless you already have a schedule that was approved by the Ministry of Information, which means secret services. That means that a Yemeni journalist working there knows very well the problems, but a foreign journalist has always this filter with authorities that obviously are all men. And not men of any kind, men of the militia, that they want to control every citizen. Women, men, children, doesn't matter. So that's a problem because you don't have access to things and then you don't know. Third, we have, witnesses, women that were arrested because they were traveling alone in a car, driving, going through a checkpoint, and then the militia said, why you women are alone, you should have the mahram, the guarding man, which is not a law is not a law of the country. It's not something in the constitution, or it's a new law that militias in the north decide to bring in the last 3 years after COVID. So it's something that popped up with the authority of the de facto government of the north, which is a government, of course, but is not recognized. It's not recognized by Aden, by the central government of Yemen. It's not recognized regionally and internationally. But then they bossy you. And then if you are a woman driving with the other three, you are close to a checkpoint, and then you go to a checkpoint, and then the guy of the checkpoint decides he wants to apply his power on you. Women were arrested and then accused of having drugs like cannabis, which is also silly to say that in a country where everyone is chewing gum, which is a drug, right? So that's a way of controlling citizens in general and women more, because after 10 years of war, militias understood that women, they are not searched, they are not controlled because of tribal system, which is a good thing. No one can put your hands over you. That's a rule in Yemen. You can't do that. So men don't do that. But then what's the best way to, to apply these controls? Not letting the woman going from a governorate to another one, not letting traveling the woman alone, and also making threats to their closer relatives. They are considered responsible for their actions. So that's why we don't have witnesses, because women who face that don't talk about it. Or if they're brave enough, they talk about it after they're released from prison, then they get out of the country. So that's why. The fourth reason is Yemen doesn't matter in the region at the moment. What matters for international powers is getting their hands on Iran. Yemen is a noise because of the militias. So once the militias will decide to make noise and join fully the strategy of Iran, then maybe, some attention will go to Yemen, but not with women, because they are not an asset in the geopolitical space at the moment. They are exactly like Afghani women. No one cares about them, which are, the worst way of being a woman is being in Afghanistan, actually. But everyone is talking about the veil in Iran, which is a country where the 90% of the women are highly educated. They are running even departments of physics or nuclear science in the universities. Why? Because our interests are on Iran, and Iran is the enemy to destroy. Of course, I just want to say that Iran, as the Pasdaran, has the same idea against the Western countries, which is USA and its allies, first Israel. Of course, it's a matter, of interest between the powers that are in the region, outside the region. But women, as usually, it's exactly the hook to take people, and the public into the discourse and approving morally the wars. So we have to be keen that that's the game, and understanding that if you want to defend women or taking care about the rights of the woman in the region, we have to see the full picture. And that's not only Iran, even though it's the only Islamic country has a specific law about the veil, but what about countries that oblige you to have the mahram, which means that you can't possess anything. You can't have a house of your own. You can't have a bank account. You can't move from a city to another if you don't have a mail with you. And imagine what that means for a journalist. This law was applied also to me when I came into the country as a double nationality person, and is applied also now also to foreign journalists if they are female, where they consider your mahram, basically the colleague is with you, which is silly because sometimes you are the mahram, or the other one who never put a finger or a toe into the country. But that's how it works. So we accept the laws that are in the country because we have to survive, we have to work, we have to respect people. But that's the situation. And this is not the situation that the woman in Yemen had in the last years. Yemen is the country of the Queen of Sheba. And this is clear in the mind of every Yemeni who is proud of being a Yemeni.
You talked about women being the hook when it comes to legitimizing a war, a military intervention in a country of the region. My question is, why women? Why not something else?
Well, because obviously women's body and bodies mostly, because minds, generally they don't care. I mean, bodies and rights are connected to the way that the secular society shows its values. We can say basically from the French Revolution. So that's the way the secular societies want to explain that they think that God is dead. Specifically, the three monotheistic religions, they always try to normalize the society, and they know that women are the craziest circle potential. I mean, women are game changers, and they could be revolutionary or they could be super conservative. So because men know that women are mostly of the two categories, so they try to pushing women to decide to be one or the other. And this is particularly in the monotheistic religion is completely applied, starting from the main figures of the female that you can join, right? So if we really think about it, the most conservative groups of the monotheistic religions, the first thing that they do is trying to be sure that the religion passes through a good mother. And this good mother is the one who passes the religion and then also the behaviors to the daughters and the sons. In the Jewish environment, it's the mother that passes the being Jewish to all the generation. And then from there, we know that if you want to preserve your morality, you should not be particularly seen in the public space. So it's from there they start, being recognizable as a Jewish, always wearing the skirt, cover your head, etc. And that wasn't so different in the Christian environment, after Christ at the beginning, because they wanted to distinguish themselves from the Roman culture, from the Hellenistic culture, where women were enslaved, where women were, with free hair and whatever, luxurious, because also there was the other part, if you want to be recognized in society, being a senator of the Republic in Rome, your wife should be good, like everyone needs to invite you because you have a beautiful wife and she has to show her beauty. So it's always a matter of, or covering a woman or showing up a woman, because then I can say that I'm a good man. And we always play the part in this, giving our consensus of being one or another. So, or you are a wife or you are a mistress. That's no way in the middle, right? Or if you want to be a mistress, it should be a mistress only for your husband, but, not in public, of course, in the privates. So that's always the problem. Then we can say that with the French Revolution, we completely changed all this, but we are always pushed to make a decision between the two choices. And that's how always the power, which is mostly a male power, tries to use, minds and bodies of women to gain power.
Thank you so much for this. And also, I was wondering more broadly, in your perspective, what's the biggest mistake that journalists make when they cover women's rights in the region?
Well, simple, using people as a tool. People are a tool to your reporting, to your safety, to your continue staying there, to your success, to your awards, to your fame. It's a scale.
And how can you prevent this?
Being a really pure heart. There's a moment where you understand, I think, if a reporter really cares about the people worked with. I'm not talking of people made the choice of being part of the society, which happened to me, which is different. But when somebody worked closely, it's trapped in a region. And then you have to help these people to get out, or they ask you for money to survive. What you do? what happened to all our colleagues in Gaza that desperately for 2 years asked us to being helped with some little money, to being out of the region, to being safe. That's where our reporter shows up as humanity. Because obviously we don't give money to people because they want to be interviewed. That's not ethic. That's not our profession. People are willing to give us their stories. But once everything is finished, you have to consider you are working in a society where somebody opens up to you. Is that because they trust you? And the trust needs to be mutual. So that means that when I need you, you should be there because you are luckier than me, which is real. It's a fact. We are luckier than them who are trapped in Gaza or wherever. So I think that the most important should be entering with a lot of respect in this region and imagine that sources, of course, are sources professionally, but then the best sources for you, they became human beings that are really trusting you. And that means that they are expecting friendship, comprehension, that you being empathic with them, with their suffering, with their problems. Also, there are people that are trying to exploit, I can say, position in order to, gain money or having, but that's how human beings work. There are people honest and there are people that are less honest, right? So you are clever enough to understand who is the person in front of you. But then if you deny your help, if you ignore those people, if you don't think that they potentially need you, where you are bad human beings, honestly. I'm sorry to say that, but that's the reality. And I really don't think that a super great journalist should not be a good human being. I really believe in the lesson that Richard Kapuscinski gave us. The cynic is not a good journalist. Not. So also because the one who was your source, he or she will continue to be your source, more and more attached to you. If you give this person a little help for you is little. It's like, that you don't buy a pair of shoes in this month and then you give this $200 to somebody else. Do you need that shoes? I don't think so. And that's the way of working. Also, when our colleagues ask for help in terms of if I want to report from Gaza, I need some money to recharge the batteries on my computer. I need new batteries. That's also, something you can do for them because you care about the freedom of the press, because there are no witnesses there. So if there's somebody you can witness firsthand what's going to happen, you have to help in order to have a good information coming from there. Also because you can't reach that place. So we have to think that we are a unique body as journalists. And there's no West and East, North and South. There's just ethics that should be applied everywhere. And we need to give each other if we need so. Because now it's their turn. But what about if it will be our turn in the future? Question mark.
Is there anything you would like to tell to young journalists that are starting this career, that maybe would like to cover the region, but I feel like what you said doesn't only apply to this region, it applies to journalism in general?
Well, there are some things I learned by myself, but of course we have also to think that we are the sons of the time where we grow. So doesn't mean that what I learned or the things that are applied when I was 30 years old, we can continue to apply now in a world that is changing brutally. But I can say that, first of all, we're starting having more problems related to how reaching the places where things happen. So what I can suggest is, pairing and working closely with colleagues that are in the region. Not only if you are an editor, but also if you are a young journalist is learning, because we can be allies and we have to be allies. And then once we can get into a place, we should have somebody with our eyes and our voice. So That's really important. Something really different than the time when I was covering the Arab Springs, for example. It's completely different. Actually, if we think about how I can cover Iran at the moment, how can I cover Gaza at the moment? There's no way to get there. We still can go to Lebanon at our risk. It's okay, but we can't get into some other places. So that's really important. Of course, and I will always stress that, try to learn the languages and the dialects. It's not easy, but it's really important because that puts you more closely to people. You can speak with more people, then you don't have also to rely totally on your producer because, translation is always an act of potentially misunderstanding things. So when you possess a language, or you try to, you can understand more details and all the layers of the conversation. And then that's a really good thing, especially in societies where not everything we say, it's exactly what we say. There are other significance under the signs that should be captured in order to understand how the conversation is going, to where it's going. So that makes a difference. So language. And then study. That's always this mistake that European and, well, I can say maybe, more people living in the West too. There's like, we are the best civilization. You are tribal people. You are poor, I'm rich, so I have more chances than you being educated. Well, study the story of Iraq. Study the poets of Iran. Study the civilization of Yemen, and then you will feel like you are like an insect compared to hundreds and hundreds of civilization. And that should be the way that we understand that all civilizations in the world was started, they develop a different way, also because of the characteristic of the region, because there were rivers or seas or whatever, mountains, or, and we have to be conscious that every civilization is unique, has its own bad and good, and then we try to serve each other into this and understanding each other. So the most important is avoiding the position up-down, but also I think being sure that there are values that are common to all people in the world. Killing somebody can be a value everywhere. So when you find somebody that in a civilization that can tell you, no, it's good if I kill somebody because he doesn't deserve to live, he has to die, or because he's a child and is the son of the people of Daesh, of ISIS, and even though he's 5 years old, he has to die. Well, you have also to be sure that there are values, there are common values that we put in the international chart that defines us as human beings. First, that should be very clear. And so then that also means that you can't eat or accept everything that people tells you just because they really believe that they can kill a child of 6 years old because he's a son of an ISIS fighter. And that's really important. So being sure who you are also is important, and being sure that there are things that guide your life. And then last but not least, I just want to say that it's really important understanding why you are doing this. There are people that just want to cover the region because they understanding that maybe covering the region is excitement, or it's like, well, I will be a hero, or I will have awards. That's not the ultimate reason of the profession. Any success can be replaced. You have to understand first who you are. Are you somebody calm enough to face specific situation? What is the ultimate reason? If your ultimate reason is success, well, we are far from the goal. And that's, I think, it's really important because we are in an industry that pushes us to do things because of success, even not for money anymore. And the question is, what's my life for? It's more important than anything else.
Thanks to Laura for coming today. And thanks so much to you who are watching or listening to this podcast. We'll see you next time with a new guest in the next episode in 2 weeks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.